Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Interfaith Dialogue. Today, we have an opportunity to grow knowledge, understanding, and appreciation for our San Antonio community. Every year, we hold a panel where different representatives of different faiths are invited to come speak to our college community about their particular faith. This is an opportunity to listen to and learn from each other and learn more about how religion affects people's lives. My name is Sasha Wilhelm. I am the director of the Student Advocacy Center here at St. Philip's College. I am a proud member of the Interfaith Committee led by Ms. Elizabeth Castillo. We have invited these panelists today to join us for our annual Interfaith Dialogue. So today we are honored to have these wonderful individuals, and we are going to hopefully have an open mind and heart about this conversation. So please help me in welcoming Ms. Destiny Hernandez, a Native American faith representative, Father Kevin Faust, our Catholic representative, Dr. Saeed Parvez, our Muslim faith representative, and Mr. Ernie Richter, our representative from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Thank you all for being here. I will now invite each panelist to take 3 to 5 minutes to introduce themselves and share the basic tenets of their faith. Ms. Destiny, would you mind starting us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Ti ilmanam, tawahayo nami tu chem naptu. Good morning, all my relations. I just greeted you in our native tongue, which is called Pahalate. This language was spoken here 12,000 years ago before English and Spanish migrated to San Antonio, which we call Yanawana, Land of the Spirit Waters. I am a tribal member of the Tapilam Coahuitecan Nation. I'm a 12th generation lineal descendant to the Mission San Antonio de Valero, known today as the Alamo, and Mission San Juan Capistrano. I wouldn't necessarily say that we follow a religion. It's more of a spirituality. We believe in the Creator as God, and we have certain essence that we burn, like sage to cleanse out negativity, copal to bring in the light spirits. We hold ceremonies very often. We have ceremonies at the change of every season. We have one coming up for the spring equinox, and we honor the 4 directions: north, south, west, east. A lot of misconceptions are that all Native Americans are the same. And while there are similarities, since we're each from a different environment, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily exactly the same. You can't say that all natives are the same, because we're not. And it's just respecting the different beliefs and the different cultures.
Thank you. Father Kevin?
My name is Father Kevin Faust. I'm a Vincentian priest. That means I belong to the Congregation of the Mission religious community. Most people know us because of DePaul University or St. John's University or Niagara University. But I've been in parish ministry for 31 years. Before that, I was a registered nurse. I'm a pastor of Holy Redeemer Catholic Church, which is the only African American parish in the Archdiocese, and Our Lady Help. So Holy Redeemer is this way, Perpetual Help is 2 blocks that way, and then St. Michael's on Indiana and Cherry. I guess the basic tenets of the Catholic faith are really summed up in the Apostles' Creed. We believe in God. We believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, who was born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried, rose from the dead. And we believe in the Holy Spirit. We are a sacramental church. Our liturgies are focused on word and sacrament. We believe in one baptism for the remission of sins. We believe in the resurrection of the dead and life everlasting. We are a church definitely of rituals. We have many rituals, and we are a church that lives those rituals both sacramentally and in liturgy. So you definitely know what season you're in when you come into the church, both in art and environment, the prayers. I like to also say that the prayers that we use every Sunday And the readings that we use are the same in every Catholic church throughout the entire world. Those prayers that the church sets out are the same. So if you go to China on Pentecost, it will be the prayers of Pentecost, just as it would be here in San Antonio. We are a hierarchical church, and we believe we are founded by Jesus Christ and built on the apostles.
Thank you. Dr. Parvez?
Good morning. My name is Dr. Syed Parvez. I'm the Program Director of Vision Care Technology, and I'm not a priest or coming from a mosque or somewhere, but I just work here in St. Philip's College, and I have been called here several times because I started reading my religion more after these interfaith dialogues came up into being. But having said that, I will just give you a few words which I have written down, and basically we are all humans, and humanity is our religion. Each and every one we have here, like different religions, but we respect everyone. And the principles of dialogues given in Islam is follow one and respect all. The methods of mutual respect, as per the teaching of Islam, while respecting others, we have to welcome differences wholeheartedly, without any reservation. It is hatred which has to be eliminated and not difference of opinion. People have their differences in belief, religion, culture, etc. But while following the religion, they have to have mutual respect for others and discover a common bond between them, which shows them all to be human beings. It becomes clear from the above discussion that the method of Islam is that of peaceful dialogue. The Quran tells us that the way of peace is the best way. The core Islamic beliefs, there are 5 beliefs in which we believe. Number 1 is belief in one God. The most important teaching of Islam is that one God is to be served and worshipped. Also, the biggest sin in Islam is to worship other beings with the God. In fact, Muslims believe that it is the only sin that God does not forgive if a person dies before repenting to him. Believed in angels. God created unseen beings called angels who work tirelessly to administer his kingdom in full obedience. The angels surround us at all times. Each has a duty. Some record us our words and deeds. Belief in the prophets of God. Muslims believe that God communicates his guidance through human prophets sent to every nation. These prophets start with Adam and include Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Peace be upon all of them. The main message of all the prophets has always been that there is only one God, and he alone is worthy of being supplicated to and worshipped. Belief in revealed books of God. Muslims believe that God revealed his wisdom and instruction through books to some of the prophets like Psalms, Torah, and Gospel. One time, however, the original teaching of these books got distorted or lost. Muslims believe the Quran is the God's final revelation revealed to Prophet Muhammad and has been fully preserved. Belief in Day of Judgment. The life of this world and all that is in it will come to an end on an appointed day. At that time, every person will be raised from the dead. God will judge each person individually according to his faith and his good and bad actions. God will show mercy and fairness in judgment. According to Islamic teaching, those who believe in God and perform good deeds will be eternally rewarded in heavens. Those who reject faith in God will be eternally punished in the fire of hell. These are the few tenets of Islam which I have told all of you today. And if you have any questions, we will deal later on.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Richter.
Thank you. Good morning. Do I need to do anything with the mic? Are we okay? Just leave it alone. Very good. Well, Sasha, Elizabeth, we appreciate the invitation. We don't get invited very much, so this is quite a treat for us. I'm not a paid priest either. My wife, Jane, is with me. I think maybe our greatest accomplishment is we're the father of 8 children and 26 grandchildren. And so all my money goes to birthday and Christmas gifts. So I had a chance to look at the brochure here, and my wife pointed out that every one of these, with exactness, are things that we agree with, we aspire to. So it's very easy to see that we have a lot more commonality than differences. Jane and I just returned from living in South America for 3 years. We were responsible for a group of about 180 missionaries down there. And you've seen them around, you can't avoid them. They're the white shirts and ties, they have on bicycle, on feet, they knock your door, they catch you in malls, and they're all over the world, literally. What I'd like to do right now, just by way of introduction, pretend that I was a missionary and you were walking down the street. And what would happen if one of these young men in a white shirt and a tie stopped you? What would they say? They would try to give you an explanation to represent what we believe. So I think one of the first things they would say as they stopped and conversed with you for about 2 minutes is that God is our loving Father. He is the Father of our spirits. This doesn't count against my time.
No, sir.
He loves us so much that he sent his son. His son is Jesus Christ, who he sent to save us. It's through Christ's grace that we are saved from our sins, and it's through Christ's resurrection that we are saved from death. One of our daughters has passed away when she was 13 of a brain aneurysm. And we cling to that promise. We cling to that faith. Jesus Christ is the central figure of our church. He is the author of our hope. He is the author of our faith. We worship Jesus Christ. We worship him, and we worship through him. Everything that we do, we teach, we aspire to, is centered in Jesus Christ. We lived with God before we came to this earth. We came to this earth as part of the plan of salvation, a plan that was divinely agreed upon and built before we came to earth. We came to this earth with a divine purpose, to gain a body. We came to this earth to experience trials and joys and to test our faith. Jesus Christ, while living here during his ministry, organized his church and his gospel and selected apostles. His ministry and his gospel is contained in the New Testament, and we believe wholeheartedly in the New Testament. We believe that after his death, the death of Christ and his apostles, the authority of Jesus Christ and the authority to act in his name was temporarily removed from the earth. A restoration was needed to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ with its authority back. And that restoration started in 1820 with a young man named Joseph Smith, when God the Father and his Son Jesus Christ appeared in a heavenly visitation to Joseph Smith with instructions on how to begin the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. This visitation marked the beginning of that restoration. That restoration continued and brought about additional scripture. It brought about the Book of Mormon. And I kicked myself because I didn't bring a copy of the Book of Mormon, but people don't use books anymore anyway. So the Book of Mormon app, which is the dealings of Jesus Christ with the inhabitants of the Americas, his gospel. That testament, or that book, is called a second testimony of Jesus Christ. It speaks of Christ in almost every single verse. The restoration also brought temples. We have temples dotted all over the earth that are different from chapels. In temples, our families are united through sacred ordinances and bind families together from where we are today all the way back to Adam, with the promise of eternal families. When I listen to myself talk about the fantastic origins of my faith, visitations to a young man, additional scripture, it sounds a little bit fanciful. But what we teach people is we are not going to try to convince anybody. We invite people to taste of the fruit. If they read the Book of Mormon, if they study, and if their heart's touched and enlightened, then we continue to explore with them our faith. And again, we're grateful for the opportunity to share with you.
Thank you. And I thank all the panelists. I think that it's obvious to our audience the passion, joy, pride, and confidence that each one of you represents in your faith. So we appreciate you sharing that information. Just as a reminder, we do also have our Zoom audience. They can only hear you through the mics, so as long as we're talking in that general direction. And also for their benefit, if someone in our in-person audience has a question, I will be repeating that question so that way our Zoom audience can hear it as well before we get a response. So, that being said, we are going to open it up to questions. Anyone in our audience, both in person or virtual, we do welcome your questions for our panelists. It can be a general question to the panel, or it can be a specific question to a specific panelist. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Okay, so could each of you talk about, according to your beliefs, what happens to us when we die?
Excellent question. So, our audience member just asked for each of our panelists, what happens to us when we die, based on your faith? Anyone can start.
You pick.
No pressure. Oh, Dr. Parves, go ahead.
I don't know. Can you hear me? Yes.
Do we need the
my
mic
faith,
on?
Which is Islam. Your question was that what
Oh.
will happen when we die? right?
Yes, yes, sir. And if we can either get you closer to the mic,
Hello.
is that better? Just want
Hello.
to make sure everyone can hear.
Can you hear me?
Right
Hello?
there.
Now you can hear me, right? Okay. So,
Thank you.
what happens according to my faith in Islam is that everyone who dies in this world, first of all, everyone will die. This is true. So when we'll die, we wait until the day of resurrection, which is, like we get up again. God will wake us up from our graves, and at that time, there's different, opinions from different faiths, but everybody will be raised just like you sow a seed and the plant grows. We will be raised just like that. Slowly, you'll be keeping on growing till you reach your real, face and your body. After that, everyone from the world will be collected in one place in front of God. The throne will be of God only. And then, after that, he will start asking his angels that bring me, divide these people into two. The one who believed in me and one who did not believe in me. So they will be divided. And after that, he will start that those who believed in me bring in front of me one by one and tell me what were their good deeds. And then, were there any bad deeds? Both will be weighed in sort of like a weighing scale. And if the bad deeds are more, he's the God. So he will always, there's a belief in Islam that finally, after telling him that you did this thing bad or you did this thing good, our belief is that he will definitely forgive all of them and put them in heavens. That's a place where you will have everything which you desire. And those who did not believe on him, he will tell them that these were your mistakes, and then after that they'll be put for the punishment in hell. But there is also belief that after they suffer their punishment, and if they repent that we did the wrong things, they will also be taken out and put in the heavens. This is our simple faith, which I understand at this time. Thank you.
Certainly, we believe that everyone will die also. But we believe in the resurrection of the dead. We believe that through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we have the hope of life in him. And so there will be a judgment. All of us will have to face judgment. Jesus Christ will be the judge of the living and the dead. And so that's what we believe.
Thank you. Destiny?
Sure. We believe that once we die, we transition to the spirit world. And oftentimes, like for instance, me, present day, in this realm, I often in prayer seek guidance and clarity from my ancestors. And so we believe that once we pass along, we will be ancestors to future generations, and we will provide that guidance and clarity through prayer as well. That connection will be there. Energy can't be destroyed. So maybe we won't be in this physical body. However, we will still be somehow transitioned into the spirit world, possibly in the stars or in other ways. So that's what we believe.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Ernie?
We're all aligned on death. We believe that after we die, our soul is contained from our body and our spirit, and our body and our spirit make our soul. Our body goes to the grave, and our spirit goes to God until await the resurrection. Ultimately, there'll be a final judgment, as I think we've talked. Our doctrine, in my view, is that judgment will be a loving judgment, not you hell, you heaven. I've got, as I mentioned, 8 kids. Even my kids that when they make mistakes or go wayward, I still love them unconditionally. So I think our perception of the judgment is we will largely judge ourselves based on a perfect recollection of our deeds. God's not going to demand us to go here or there. He will let us go where we will be the most comfortable. Somebody that is sinning and denies and lives a life that is not consistent with God's will, and only if they don't repent. The beauty of our earth life is that we can always repent and have hope in that grace. But if for some reason we get in the presence of God and we feel that shame, it would almost be hell to be in his presence in heaven. And so we would go to where we're the most comfortable. And we believe that there's a large variation of places. God has many mansions, but we believe that we will be in a place of comfort and love. Even the lowest degree of glory will be a glory compared to where we are now.
Thank you. There was one question that came up as we were preparing for this. There's quite a few of us in this audience, in particular boy moms, but their parents, or whether it be little ones or older ones. And so, because this was top of mind and we were discussing, I was wondering, when a child is born, whether it be in infancy or early, very, very early life, is there a particular ceremony, blessing, sacrament that happens in your faith that kind of brings the child in, or is that something that happens later in their life?
For us, that would be the sacrament of baptism. And it can take place as soon after birth or later. And that is for us the way in which the child is brought into the faith community and into the church. And so you have some people who wait just a while for their children to be baptized, or of course we have adults who come into the church who are baptized. But for us it would be baptism as soon as they're born.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
In our faith in Islam, there is a ceremony just after the birth. As you know, as you know that these days when a child is born in a hospital, everywhere, he's given a bath. That we all agree that, he's given a bath there. And after that, he's wrapped up in a cloth or something. And then one person has to be called, which is a father or anybody who's near at that time who belongs to the faith of Islam. he comes and says a small prayer in the child's ear. And that prayer is very, light, because the ears are very, they are hearing the words first time. So they say a prayer. That prayer is the same prayer which is done in the mosque for call of the prayer. Like the prayer time happens and they call. So at that time, what is said there is, the main wording is that God is great. God is great, God is great, 3 times. We say that in the ear, and especially in the right ear, because we also believe that there are 2 angels God has given to everyone. One sits on the right shoulder and one on the left shoulder. The right one writes all the good deeds which you do in this world, and the left one does write all the bad deeds which you do here. So that will be the book which will be presented later on when we die. So that was the answer to that.
Yes,
Yeah, thank you.
We baptize our children when they're 8 years old, and that's considered the age of accountability, or the age at which they can distinguish more clearly between right and wrong, even though they have a lot to learn. More importantly, what happens to a child if they die before they're baptized? We believe that all children, in fact, anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to hear and accept the gospel of Jesus Christ, will be saved and will have that opportunity in the life hereafter, to be, rather than saying that they will be damned or whatever because they didn't receive that ordinance, they will have that opportunity given to them in the life to come.
thank you.
My wife reminded me that when babies are born, we do give them a blessing. It's not a required ordinance, but it's basically an opportunity for the father to bless the child and to help set them on the path.
Thank you. Ms. Hernandez.
For me, I feel like I have to describe it from a pre-colonization lens. And, back in the day, there were no hospitals. So, they did water births. And water is representing the sacred feminine energy. When a baby is in the womb, they're in water inside of your womb. And when you give birth into the water, it's transitioning the baby from the womb into water, because that's the element that they were nurtured in for those 9 months. And so, water birth is typically the way that they would give birth in those days. And I'm not a mother yet. I had not given birth myself. However, I do want to have a water birth as well. And yes, it's also a ceremony too. You're typically surrounded by midwives and women that you are in your circle and that you keep close to you, who you trust being around when your baby is being born into this world. And there are songs, ceremonial songs and drum that are also surrounding you during that time.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I'll start with Marisa and then go back to the dean. Yes, ma'am.
How do you reconcile your fundamental religious tenets with some of the violence that has been perpetrated historically in the name of religion, and in some cases sanctioned by religion?
Okay, I'm going to repeat that for our Zoom audience. You may need to coach me. How do you reconcile the... Let's start over.
How do you reconcile the religious tenets
Okay, how do you reconcile the religious tenets with the violence that has been perpetrated, sometimes in the name of religion or against and or sanctioned by a religion? Yes, sir.
Actually, this is my personal belief also, and belief of lot of others who follow Islam, that ignorance is the main reason. People don't understand, and those who say that we are Muslim, they are not actually Muslims, or if they say they are a Christian or some other, they don't follow their faith as well. Because if they follow their faith does not allow them to do any violence. All faiths they say that you have to be kind to the next person, to a human being. So there is no point that for violence in any religion, as far as I believe. So having said that, uh, we have to make sure that there is education all over the world. All people are educated, which at this time they are not. Even in very advanced countries, there are a lot of people who are not educated. They don't understand what they're doing. That may be one of the reasons. Thank you.
I would say that even though we would say the church is holy, the church is made up of human beings. And I think that human beings err. I don't think God errs. I think human beings err. And so therefore, even when we look at something like racism and how African Americans at one time in many of our parishes were forced to sit in the back of church, there's no excuse for that. There's no way to justify that. And that's why we look at some of those saints and religious communities who stood up to that and confronted that and confronted the sin that it was. And so I think that in any church, we're made up of human beings, and human beings err, and human beings sin. And whenever we come to that realization, we need to stand up and say something about that and to change those things that perpetrate that.
I'll add my comment. You really can't reconcile inappropriate, violent, or racial behavior with any gospel, or it occurs. I agree with the Father. Just it's by virtue of human frailty and fault. There's a scripture that we follow that says no power or influence can or ought to be maintained by virtue of the priesthood, only by persuasion, long-suffering, gentleness, and meekness, and by love unfeigned. That's what we aspire for. But because we're human, there may be pockets or elements that we constantly strive to correct.
Thank you.
I will comment. I don't have an answer because my people were killed based off of that. So it is a conflicted relationship for me because when the Spaniards came and they brought Catholicism, they also wiped out a lot of our people and raped the women and had babies and created that mixture of what we now know today as Mexican American. And so, yes, thank you for that question also. And it is a very conflicted relationship for me. Not that I necessarily judge people who have that faith, but when I think about that, when I think about all of that, it triggers that trauma that my ancestors faced when the Spaniards came and brought that religion. And some of my ancestors also were forced to assimilate or die, and so they adopted that religion too. And in my younger years, I was taught Catholicism as well. It's a very conflicted relationship for us because we are mission Indians, so it's very conflicted for us because we want to honor both sides of it. We want to honor the fact that our ancestors, those earlier generations, assimilated and started having those beliefs and following that way. But it's also like, wait a second, that came with a price, But then again, I'm here, I'm alive today because some of them assimilated, right? And so sometimes we like to think of it as they chose to assimilate knowing that the future generations were going to reconnect to their indigeneity and bring back those beliefs, keep the culture alive, and pass it down to the future generations.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Dean Kapoor, you had a question. Oh. So just to repeat for our online audience, it has been kind of implied from our panelists, or our audience can pick up, that there are some overlapping tenets. And so the question to our panel is, do you generally see those overlaps, that kind of in between, that life through death, and how those tenets of each faith can kind of join, merge together, find those similarities?
My brother here mentioned Abraham. We are both Abrahamic faiths. I mean, we both honor Abraham. I believe the Quran even mentions the Blessed Mother, if I'm not mistaken. And I've heard some similarities in terms of judgment. And so there are similarities. And we do recognize that. We know that about other faiths, the things that are similar and the things where we are different. But yeah, I don't know what else to say.
I think he has mentioned very clearly that there are similarities. First of all, this is true, that similarities, like as he said, we are all Abrahamic faiths.
One God.
One God, and we believe in all of us believe in one God. First thing is this. We also believe in the prophets before Jesus, and also Jesus is also our beloved prophet in Islam. So there are several, similarities in our faith with other faiths. Our friend on this side also mentions few things like you love your kids to the best of whatever, you said few words about the kids. So I believe that that's quite true. Everybody believes, and God also believes in all of his kids. We are all his kids, He has brought us into this world.
If you,
So,
sorry.
Yes, sir.
If you look at doctrine and core beliefs and aspired behavior, I think there's a lot more similarities than differences. If you got into doctrine and specific things about what happens when and what about this scripture versus your interpretation of that versus that, yeah, then there you can kind of split hairs and so forth. My experience, we lived in the Middle East for 5 years, we've lived down in South America for 5 years. My experience of interacting with people around the world is that humankind is we're brothers and sisters. We all love our children. We all have friends. We all want to be listened to. We love to laugh, sense of humor, to be respected, to be listened to. Those things bind us together more than the nuances of our religion.
Mr. Hernandez, did you have anything?
I mean, I do see on this paper here, I see all of these quotes, and the similarities that I see between all of these quotes is basically to not hurt other people. And I think that that's a very big component, because hurt people hurt people. And so we're all in this journey of healing and taking care of ourselves, learning to love ourselves. And once we do that, we're able to love other people as well.
Thank you. Ms. Teo.
Would you all mind describing if groups of believers get together, and if so, what are those meetings called? How often do they happen? What happens in them?
So the question is, could you please describe, if groups of believers get together or gather, what are those meetings called? What happens in those meetings, and how often do those meetings occur?
Are you saying believers of, like in my congregation, if they got together?
So for example, I'm speaking as a Catholic, I'm like Mass, like Sunday Mass. Okay.
Well, as they gather on Sunday, we would call it the liturgy or Eucharist or Mass, the Sunday gathering, whatever. And that is where Sunday is the major focus for us in terms of liturgy and worship. We believe that our week begins and with that, and the Eucharist is central to that. But we also have gatherings that are called Bible study, and we have adult faith education, and we have prayer groups. So they wouldn't have the Eucharist, they wouldn't celebrate the liturgy at those, but usually they're weekly, separate from the Sunday liturgy. One of them I know in our parish takes place on Sunday, but others take place throughout the week at different times.
We have a prayer gathering on Friday afternoon, and there is no name given to that kind of congregation or whatever you are asking, but people come over there. They do not pray as we do it, but they stay behind us, and then there are chairs given to them to watch everything which is happening there. And people come over there in groups, like in buses bring them from different churches and various other places in the city also. So they go to different mosques in San Antonio. The biggest mosque one is near Medical Center, and one is near Dizavala. So they go over there mainly and listen, and then if anybody wants to, they listen to the sermon which is given by a pastor, just like my friend here, and he gives a sermon every week on that Friday. So they listen to that, and after that, when everything finishes, people go and meet them, they intermingle and talk with them, and some of them, they stay there. They say that they have questions and other things, so they stay there, and then the pastor, he goes there, talks with them, answer their questions just as we are doing here, and then they are served a lunch and everything, and they go home. So that's what we do, but there's no name given to that.
Thank you.
You go first.
We pray inside of sweat lodges, and the reason why we pray inside of sweat lodges is to cleanse our spirit, to let it all out, let it out through the sweating. And inside of those lodges, like, we pray for what we need to pray for. If we need to ask for clarity or guidance, or just release some burdens that we've been carrying for a long time. And I mean, even if I need to sit down with somebody, if, like, let's say for instance it's a relationship, if there's some really hard struggles that are happening, I can take tobacco to an elder who I know pours for a sweat lodge and say, look, I'm really going through this right now, and I would like to ask you to pour a sweat lodge for myself and this other person who I'm in a relationship with, so that way we can hold space for each other and talk about what we need to talk about inside of a safe space with that discharge coming through. And we sing songs in there, and it's in our native tongue, and it's that connection to the earth and connection to our ancestors and those medicines to help us.
We also have weekly meetings. They're a 2-hour block every Sunday. The first hour we partake of the sacrament. Second hour is Sunday school. We also have weekly meetings as families, where parents are given resources to gather their family and to teach them behavior and the gospel of Jesus Christ. We also encourage our members to go to the temple, again, which is different from a chapel. We have a temple here in San Antonio off Stone Oak, and those are additional ordinances that are performed as often as they can.
Thank you all. Oh, sorry, Kelly.
What responsibilities do you have as a member of your faith to care for the earth, the great creation?
So the question is, what responsibilities do you have as members of your faith to care for the earth and creation?
Well, definitely, I feel like our culture, that's one of the biggest things, is taking care of Mother Earth and giving offerings and taking care of the land as much as we can. It's again, like, it's hard because I'm thinking pre-colonization lens, and I'm also thinking how we live today, right? And how everything is just material everywhere, and buildings and things that are not necessarily good for the atmosphere. And you know, I mean, there's the whole climate change discussion too, which is a whole other tangent, but it's a very big responsibility for us to care for the land. And in our community, you know, it's accountability towards each other too. Like, are you, is that something that you think is good for the earth? And you know, we hold each other to it, and so it's a big responsibility for us to take care of Mother Earth and nurture her the way that she nurtures us and holds us every single day.
Certainly, in the church, we would hold that it is a gift from God, and that we have a moral responsibility to care for the earth and her resources now, not just for us, but for future generations. And so, and certainly Pope Francis has spoken very clearly on that and has called us as a church to be concerned and to work for the good of the environment.
In Islam, our Prophet has said on many occasions that all the plants in this world, they also have a life. They are living. So they sleep and they wake up. So it is said by him that do not cut or injure any kind of trees on this earth, number one. Number two is that we are forbidden to break or take out any kind of fruit or anything from the plants after the sun sets in the evening. We cannot pluck any flower. We cannot touch any kind of, to damage any kind of cutting any grass or anything after sunset. It is forbidden for us to do that. If we do it, we'll give harm to the plant, and they cry also, it is said. So that is our faith. So in that way, we take care of all the plants on this earth.
We believe all things were created by God. We're taught to respect His creations. The Bible tells us that God even notes when a sparrow falls. I would say, though, our focus is maybe more tangential than some of the responses that I've heard. You know, rather than focusing on the environment, we focus on humankind and their contribution to bring peace and tranquility and harmony to the environment. When the environment falls apart, an earthquake, famine, our church is very soon to be on the front lines of adding, and I'm sure many of my brother and sister here, we do the same thing. They're organized religion, but I think that's a major component of caring for the earth, is caring for humankind and all the suffering that's going on in the earth.
Thank you. Roxanne, did you have a question?
So, in observing that 3 out of 4 panelists are men today, my question is regarding gender roles within your religions. Are men and women viewed as equal as far as roles, or how are those roles different?
So the question is that in noticing that our panel is 3/4 male, how are gender roles represented in the faith, and is there equality between the genders in your faith? So,
Well, I'll speak first. In the Catholic Church, we have a male clergy, and that comes from Christ called the apostles, who were male, and that continues in the church this day. But before I was a priest, I was baptized. And in the baptism of the faithful, there's no gender difference, and there's no, this one's better than that one. We are all baptized and are brothers and sisters in the Lord. So in that sense, but in terms of the sacramental priesthood, I am clergy, whereas other men and women who are not ordained are the laity. And I have certain roles as an ordained minister. Religious women, by that I mean women who belong to religious communities, I think that they have exercised authority and probably have more authority because many of them over the years have been the ones who shaped the minds of young Catholics in education and in formation. And so while we have that difference between the sacramental priesthood and the laity, I guess I'd have to say, yes, women are different in the church when it comes to that. But in terms of the sacrament of baptism, in terms of the faithful, we're all the same. Women can hold different positions in the church today that they couldn't hold in the future, in the past. If you look at Pope Francis, he's put women in charge of some of the dicasteries in the Vatican that were previously held by men. Here in this archdiocese, Sister Jane Ann Slater was the chancellor of the archdiocese, previously a task held by men. So there are things that I think women are being put into place where they can, and in leadership positions in dioceses and in the church. It just is not in the sacramental priesthood.
Actually, we are very close to each other in this sense that there is a difference between the roles which women play and the men play in our religion. In our mosques, where the sermons are given and, the people go for prayers, it's always led by men. The women are there, but they are separately leading their own prayer if they want to. After the men's prayer is finished and somebody comes over late in the women's section, then a woman can lead their prayer there. But they are always separate. This is in our mosque. The other thing is that, as he said, that you were given a certain role to play after a ceremony, right? So here in our place also is also the same, that none of us, can go straight there and say that I am the priest today. He cannot be like that because he has to be a learned person who has gone through everything in certain institutions. All over the world, there are certain institutions where they have to go and read and everything, or read other religions also in his own religion, and then become a priest, which is called sheikh in our language. So that person then leads the community in our church, in our mosque. So there is a difference. But having said that, there is another very important thing which people may not have been knowing, that in our faith, that the responsibility of leading the whole family in the home is men's. If the women work, they are allowed to work, but that's not their responsibility. To support their family or to take care of their family, the main responsibility falls on the men, who take care of the women also, and also of their kids, or of their mother and father. So this is our faith. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm struggling with the language that's being used of, allowing women, and they're always separate, and the priest put her in the place. I'm kind of struggling with that language because it sounds very sexist. And that's something that we struggle with as women in society today, big time. I also want to acknowledge that March is International Women's Month, and tomorrow is International Women's Day. However, I don't think we need just one day or 1 month out of the year to acknowledge our gifts. We've been silenced and enslaved and kept in our place for centuries. But going back to our culture, it's very matriarchal based. Women are seen and honored for their gift of being able to transfer life from the spirit world into this realm. And although, because of colonization and patriarchal practices that were brought here, we can face struggles in our own circles of dealing with sexism, but pre-colonization, it was definitely a more matriarchal-based community. Thank you. Thank you for that question. I thought I was the only one that noticed I was the only woman.
I'm convinced. I just had my wife take my place, we'll call it even. She'd do a better job than me anyway. I would, my observation and knowledge of our religion is that women play an absolutely equal role. They are our partners in everything. They are respected and esteemed. There are some situations where we have different roles, but they're equal roles. And the priesthood would not function without women. There are women general authorities, leaders, and there are women that perform ordinances. And I said we could identify some differences, but what supersedes all differences is the equity and respect and esteem we show women.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I actually have a comment, if that's allowed.
Sure.
I think one of the differences, a major difference in our religion as opposed to others, is that we respect and admire the decision of Eve to partake of the fruit first before Adam. I know in a lot of religions, that could be the source of perhaps some of the prejudice against women in certain religions. It's Eve's fault, she partook of the fruit first. We believe that she had the courage to do that in order that if she did it, there would be no people on the earth. She brought forth mortality that we could have gain bodies, come to earth and gain bodies through mortality. And so, like my husband said, perhaps our roles are different, but they are equal and just as important, and it's a true partnership. I speak in church. I have callings and responsibilities. So,
Okay, thank you. And just to summarize for our online audience, Mrs. Richter was saying that in their faith tenet, there is a respect and an admiration for Eve, and please correct me if I summarize incorrectly, for partaking in the fruit first, because it is that first choice that led us basically to where we are today, and the string of events that led to the current event, culture, community that you have now, right? Thank you. So we are about out of time. We need to go. Would Jared like to say a few things?
So, first of all, thanks for everyone for coming. It's been great. One thing that the Interfaith Committee does is we do a Better Together Day. So expanded that to Better Together Month. And so what we're going to do is we partner with United Way for the United Way Shoebox Project. So what we try and do is throughout the month of March and April, we collect hygiene products. We put them in shoeboxes. You decorate the shoebox and we drop it off at United Way, distribute it to families in need, showing up the boxes here. So anything from like tissues, hand sanitizers, tampons, toothbrushes, toothpaste, anything that could be a hygiene product. If you want to drop it off at North Room 114, we also have some boxes there for y'all if you don't have any shoe boxes. But yeah, we'll have be collecting goods all through the months of March and April and then drop them off at United Way. So part of the interfaith.
Yes. So as part of Interfaith Committee, Jared was just discussing the Shoebox Project, where we collect hygiene items and then share them and distribute them through United Way to families in need. And more information can be found on our website. Yes. It's there. You'll find it. Thank you. So just, I know we are 1 minute over. I just want to give our panel just a quick, if there is a salutation, a goodbye, a quick blessing, anything like that that you would like to share, just a couple words to wrap us up.
Adios, que Dios les bendiga. It's been a privilege and an opportunity for us to be able to share our faith. We appreciate your kind receptivity, and it's really a statement of you all to be part of this organization. not many people want to have anything to do with faith, much less interfaith. So I commend each of you for your generosity and your open-mindedness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Most of the time I've been here. And thanks to all the audience. And it was great that today we had a lot of our participation by the audience compared to the last few ones. Thank you so much for participating in this very important interfaith discussion. Thank you, and you have a nice and safe day today.
I would say thank you for allowing me to be here, to be a part of this. I think one of the real issues that we face in the world today is a great deal of what I would say enclosed and insular thinking. And I think one of the best ways that we can grow is to grow in a knowledge and understanding, especially when it comes to religion, of what other churches believe. It's very easy to take pot shots at other churches. I always say, as a priest, I don't talk about other churches from the pulpit. If I don't have enough to say about the gospel of Jesus Christ and the message of my church during that time, then I probably should sit down. It's not a time to attack other religions, and there's no reason for us to attack any religion at any time unless we really know what our own faith teaches first. And when we know what our own faith teaches, then to grow in a knowledge and of understanding of what others believe. I think in that way we can grow as a community of men and women in love.
Tawa hayo nami tu chem nap tu nalet sam tamok.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you again. Thank you our participants and our participating audience very much. You'll have a wonderful day.